of Thrones gave us 3 dragons and 1 true dragon rider, but House of the Dragon has built something far bigger, an entire ecosystem of nearly 20 distinct dragons, a small army of riders, and at least 4 major dragon-on-dragon fights. Keeping track of who rides what can be difficult, so today we're going to sort that out. The first dragon the show properly introduces us to is Syrax, the yellow-scaled she-dragon belonging to Rhaenyra Targaryen. Through Syrax, we get our earliest look at how Targaryen dragon culture actually functions. The dragon pit beneath King's Landing, the dragon keepers who tend to the beasts, and the practice of placing dragon eggs in the cribs of Targaryen infants in the hope that they'll hatch and bond with the child. Not every egg hatches, which is why some Targaryens grow up dragonless or eventually have to claim an older, unclaimed dragon instead. Rhaenyra bonded with Syrax at age 7, and named her after a goddess of old Valyria, making her Syrax's very first rider. Syrax also gives us our first taste of one of the show's grimmer customs. Targaryens burn their dead with dragonfire, a tradition Rhaenyra invokes in the series premiere when she has Syrax cremate her mother and infant brother. It's a custom that stretches back to old Valyria itself, long before the Targaryens ever set foot in Westeros, and the show uses it again and again to mark the death of nearly every major character who carries dragon blood. By the events of the Red Sowing in Season 2, Syrax has grown into a fully adult, formidable dragon. However, unlike the other dragons, Syrax hasn't seen real battle yet, making her quite inexperienced in that aspect. She's mostly been used for travel and as a show of force, roaring alongside Vermithor and Silverwing to scare off Aemon and Vhagar when they come sniffing around Dragonstone. The lack of combat experience is part of why Rhaenyra has so often kept Syrax grounded during the war's early skirmishes, choosing to protect her own dragon rather than risk her against far more battle-tested rivals. But while Rhaenyra's dragon is elegant and a symbol of Targaryen tradition, her husband's dragon, Caraxes, is pure menace. Daemon Targaryen's mount, nicknamed the Blood Wyrm for his blood-red scales, is easily the strangest-looking dragon in the show. Where most dragons read as bulky and reptilian, Caraxes looks almost like something out of a different myth entirely. Closer to a worm or a serpent than a classic dragon silhouette fans come to know from Game of Thrones. It has a long serpentine body, a slender extended neck, and membrane-laced wings. He also has horned brows and a roar that sounds less like a dragon and more like something dredged up from the bottom of the ocean. Caraxes is also a battle-hardened veteran, having seen combat decades before Daemon ever climbed onto his back during the War for the Stepstones. Even the Dragon Keepers raised him in the Dragon Pit considered him the fiercest of his generation, and that reputation for ferocity has followed him into every conflict he's flown since. Caraxes wasn't always Daemon's dragon either. His first rider was Prince Aemon Targaryen, who fought with him in the Fourth Dornish War roughly 20 years before the show begins. Aemon happened to be the father of Rhaenys Targaryen, which makes for an interesting bit of family trivia. Rhaenys' father rode the dragon that would eventually belong to her own husband's rival faction's harshest enemy. After Aemon's death, Caraxes went unridden for years before Daemon finally claimed him, and despite being only about half the size of Vhagar, his speed and viciousness in the air make him one of the very few dragons capable of giving the old Queen of Dragons a real fight. Daemon and Caraxes go on to become one of the most lethal pairings in Westeros, and their partnership only deepens as the Dance of the Dragons escalates in seasons 2 and 3. Another formidable dragon we see in the show is Meleys. Rhaenys Targaryen rides Meleys, a scarlet she-dragon known as the Red Queen, a fitting title for the woman fans call the Queen Who Never Was. Meleys was once considered the fastest dragon in Westeros, and even well into her advanced age, she proves in Season 1 that she's still lethally quick and powerful. Rhaenys is actually Meleys' second rider. The dragon originally belonged to Alyssa Targaryen, mother of both Viserys and Daemon, who died in childbirth. Rhaenys claimed Meleys after that, about 20 years before she was nearly crowned queen herself. Despite her age, Meleys remains one of the most agile dragons in Westeros, able to outmaneuver far larger opponents in the air, which is exactly the kind of speed that very nearly carries her through her final battle. Meleys' story comes to a devastating end in Season 2's 4th episode, Rook's Rest. Believing she's simply breaking a siege, Rhaenys flies Meleys into what turns out to be a trap set by Sir Criston Cole. King Aegon II arrives unexpectedly on Sunfire, and the two dragons grapple in the sky, with Meleys getting the better of the golden dragon and sinking her teeth into his wing. Then Aemon shows up on Vhagar and incinerates both combatants with a single blast of dragonfire, sending all 3 dragons crashing to the earth. Vhagar and Aemon walk away untouched. Sunfire survives, but is badly maimed. Unfortunately, Meleys does not survive the battle, and neither does Rhaenys, whose body is later found burned beside her dragon's carcass. It's one of the most significant losses Rhaenyra's faction suffers in the entire war, and Corlys Balerion, Rhaenys' husband, never quite forgives blames Rhaenyra for it. The next magnificent beast belonging to the Black faction is Seasmoke, Laenor Valerion's dragon. Seasmoke is a pale, silvery gray beast who bonded with Laenor at a young age and had no prior riders. Seasmoke gets relatively little screen time in Season 1, but makes a real impression during the Stepstones battle. The far more interesting development comes after Laenor fakes his own death to escape his marriage and live freely in Essos, leaving Seasmoke riderless on Driftmark for years. That changes in Season 2 when Seasmoke goes looking for a new rider entirely on his own terms. He tracks down Adam of Hull, a bastard-born shipwright who turns out to be Laenor's own illegitimate half-brother, and effectively claims Adam rather than the other way around. It's a small but pointed detail. Seasmoke seems to sense the family connection. Adam quickly becomes one of Rhaenyra's most trusted dragon riders, flying Seasmoke into battle and standing at her side during pivotal moments at Harrenhal in Season 2. It's a quiet but powerful statement on the show's part. Dragons, unlike crowns and castles, don't actually care about legitimacy, and a bastard shipwright can end up just as worthy a rider as any trueborn prince. Rhaenyra's sons each get their own dragon, following their crib egg tradition. Jacaerys, her eldest, bonds with Vermax, whose hatching put to rest years of court gossip questioning Jace's parentage. As the first young dragon the show really lets us watch grow up, Vermax gives us our clearest look yet at how Targaryen children are trained alongside their dragons. By Season 2, Jace has matured into a genuinely capable dragon rider, helping secure the North and the River Lords for his mother's cause. Though his inexperience nearly cost him during a tense fight near the Triarchy's fleet in the Gullet. As Rhaenyra's heir, Jace also carries a weight none of his siblings have to bear, knowing that whatever happens to him and Vermax in this war could decide who actually sits the Iron Throne when it's over. Lucerys rides Syrax, a smaller dragon who barely appears until the devastating climax of Season 1. Confronted in the sky above Storm's End by Aemond on the far larger Vhagar, Syrax panics and lashes out against his own rider's wishes, attacking a dragon many times his size. Vhagar responds instantly and brutally, killing both Syrax and Lucerys. It's the moment the simmering rivalry between the Blacks and the Greens turns into open war, and it drives home one of the show's most important running themes. Dragons are never truly tame, no matter how loyal they seem. Syrax is younger and smaller than almost every other dragon we've discussed so far, which is exactly why the mismatch against Vhagar proves so fatal. Joffrey, Rhaenyra's third son, claims the smallest of his brother's dragons, Caraxes, revealed in the Season 1 finale. Like his siblings, his bond with his dragon began in the cradle, and like Caraxes himself, Joffrey is still very much a child at this point in the story, which keeps the two of them firmly out of any actual combat for now. Like Rhaenyra, Daemon's children also get dragons. Baela Targaryen, Daemon's eldest daughter with Laena Velaryon, rides Moondancer, a swift, pale green young dragon. Though Moondancer doesn't get much screen time in Season 1, Season 2 puts her to direct use, with Baela using her on scouting flights to track Criston Cole's advancing army through the Crownlands. Of all Rhaenyra's dragon riders, Baela is arguably the most naturally gifted in the saddle, and the show leans into that by giving her some of the war's most daring reconnaissance work. Baela's younger sister Rhaena isn't so lucky. A dragon egg was placed in her crib as a child, but it never hatched, leaving her the rare Targaryen who grows up entirely dragonless, a fact that visibly eats at her sense of place within the family. For a girl born into a house defined by dragon riders, going without one for most of her childhood is its own quiet tragedy, and the show makes sure we feel the sting of it every time her siblings take to the sky without her. That changes at the very end of Season 2, when Rhaena stumbles upon a massive, untamed dragon living wild in the Vale, known as Sheepstealer. She manages to claim the beast and rides her into the chaotic, fiery Battle of the Gullet that opens Season 3. The bond is far from secure, though. Sheepstealer's wild nature shows almost immediately, and the dragon ends up torching several ships during the battle, ostensibly fighting for Rhaenyra's side, but doing so with a will entirely her own. Unlike the dragons raised from the crib, Sheepstealer has spent her whole life feeding on livestock and whatever she could catch in the wild, which goes a long way toward explaining why she answers to instinct first and rider second even mid-battle. Season 2 of House of the Dragon introduces a concept straight out of George R.R. Martin's source material: the Red Sowing. Desperate to even the numbers against the Greens, Rhaenyra has Mysaria scour King's Landing for dragon seeds, lowborn bastards with enough hidden Targaryen blood that they might be able to claim one of Dragonstone's riderless dragons. It does not go smoothly. Rhaenyra summons Vermithor, the largest dragon left alive after Vhagar, and lets a crowd of hopefuls try their luck. The first man who approaches gets burned alive on the spot, and Vermithor goes on a rampage that kills a horrifying number of assembled dragon seeds in front of a watching crowd. The slaughter only stops when Hugh, a King's Landing blacksmith and the secret grandson of an exiled Targaryen prince, refuses to run and stands his ground ground in front of the dragon to protect another dragon seed. Vermithor, impressed, accepts him. Meanwhile, a separate dragon seed named Ulf the White stumbles, almost by accident, into the lair of Silverwing, an old dragon who once belonged to Queen Alysanne Targaryen. Rather than testing Ulf the way Vermithor tested everyone else, Silverwing simply accepts him, with little drama at all. Ulf wastes no time taking an unauthorized joyride over King's Landing on his new mount. This is both one of the funniest scenes in the show, and the moment Aemond realizes, chasing after them on Vhagar, that Rhaenyra suddenly has 3 full-grown adult dragons standing ready at Dragonstone. This piece of information is more than enough to make him think twice about attacking. By the start of Season 3, Rhaenyra's faction has grown to roughly 7 dragons against the Greens' 3, almost entirely thanks to the Red Sowing. The dragons belonging to the Greens, the Hightower faction, are no less formidable. King Aegon II rides Sunfire, widely considered the single most beautiful dragon ever to exist, with brilliant golden scales and, according to the books, flames that burn gold rather than orange. Most dragons in this show breathe completely ordinary fire, which makes Sunfire's golden breath one of the rarer cosmetic quirks in all of Targaryen dragon lore. He's still a relatively young dragon when the war breaks out, which matters quite a bit once he's thrown into combat against a much older and more battle-tested opponent. Sunfire's defining moment so far is the Battle of Rook's Rest, where he fights alongside Vhagar against Meleys and gets torn up badly in the process. He's left with a half-torn wing among his injuries, and then catches the brunt of Vhagar's own dragonfire when Aemond's blast meant for Rhaenys engulfs both enemy and brother alike. Aegon survives, horrifically burned, and is incapacitated for the better part of a year. Sunfire, too wounded and too heavy to fly, is left stranded in the fields near Rook's Rest, forced to live off livestock and the dead while Criston Cole's men guard him. As Season 3 opens, several characters openly assume Sunfire is dead, but the show never actually confirmed a body. This has plenty of fans wondering whether the most beautiful dragon in Westeros might still have a card left to play. The next major dragon belonging to this faction is Dreamfire. Queen Alicent's dragon, Dreamfire, has silver scales and pale blue wings and is considerably older than her rider. Dreamfire hatched generations earlier during the reign of Aegon I, and was originally claimed by Rhaena Targaryen, Aegon's granddaughter. After Rhaena's death, Dreamfire sat without a rider for a long stretch, until Alicent claimed her. A political necessity more than anything resembling the deep childhood bond most other Targaryens share with their dragons. Dreamfire's exact size is left fairly ambiguous in the show, partly because she spent so many of her 100+ years confined to the dragon pit, rather than flying free. And then there's Vhagar, the biggest, oldest, and most feared dragon left alive by the time the dance begins. Vhagar hatched on Dragonstone shortly after the doom of Valeria, the same clutch that produced Caraxes. Visenya Targaryen claimed her during the original conquest of Westeros, and together with Aegon's Balerion and Rhaenys' Caraxes, the 3 dragons burned their way across the 7 kingdoms. Vhagar went on to outlive both of them, watching Balerion die of old age, and Caraxes die in battle in Dorne, which left her as the single oldest living dragon in Westeros by the time House of the Dragon story actually starts. Her rider history reads almost like a relay race through Targaryen tragedy. After Visenya's death, Vhagar sat riderless until Baelon Targaryen, father to Viserys and Daemon, claimed her, riding her in battle alongside Caraxes during the Fourth Dornish War. When Baelon died, Vhagar went unclaimed again until Laena Velaryon bonded with her, becoming, by most accounts, the first genuinely gentle and affectionate rider the old dragon ever had. After Laena's death, Vhagar passed to Aemond Targaryen, who's anything but gentle, and who uses her with ruthless, almost gleeful efficiency through the dance, killing Lucerys and Syrax in Season 1, and then Rhaenys and Meleys in Season 2. Despite the Greens having fewer dragons overall than the Blacks, Vhagar alone is enough to make Team Green a terrifying threat in the air, and her continued survival into Season 3, completely unscathed by 2 major dragon battles, says everything about why she's still called the Queen of all Dragons. No other dragon in the show has come close to matching her size, and none of her opponents so far have lasted more than a few seconds once she actually commits to a fight. She's fierce, formidable, and doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. Rounding out the Greens is Tessarion, nicknamed the Blue Queen, a young she-dragon with vivid blue scales who belongs to Daeron Targaryen, the youngest son of Viserys and Alicent. Daeron has been kept mostly off-screen so far, said to be serving as a ward in Old Town under Lord Hightower, but his existence and his dragon's striking blue flame, an even rarer trait than Sunfire's gold, have been confirmed and are widely expected to factor more heavily into the back half of the war. Even with fewer dragons than Rhaenyra's faction, the Hightower dragons are still way more battle-hardened, putting the 2 factions on almost equal footing. One side has numbers, but the other has quality, a very interesting twist in the show. But not every dragon in Westeros has, or has ever had, a human attached to it, and these riderless beasts are some of the most dangerous wild cards left on the board. One of the most popular dragons belonging to this group is Vermithor. Before he became Hugh's dragon during the Red Sowing, Vermithor belonged to King Jaehaerys I, the old king glimpsed in the show's prologue, whose decision to name Viserys his own heir over Rhaenyra's rival claimants set this entire war in motion. Nicknamed the Bronze Fury for his enormous size and metallic scales, Vermithor is the second largest and second oldest living dragon behind only Vhagar, and he saw real combat during the Fourth Dornish War. He is, by most accounts in the source material, easily 3 times the size of a younger dragon like Tessarion, with a flame powerful enough to melt steel and stone outright. After Jaehaerys' death, Vermithor sat unclaimed in Dragonmount for decades. He's a sleeping giant nobody dared approach until Rhaenyra's desperate gambit finally woke him back up. Another important dragon is Silverwing. This dragon belonged to Queen Alysanne Targaryen, Jaehaerys' wife, and hatched roughly 100 years before the events of the show. She and Vermithor were something close to a mated pair, often found coiled together, mirroring the genuine affection their original writer shared, a rare thing in a family this tangled up in political marriages. Following Alysanne's death about 40 years before Rhaenyra's coronation, Silverwing went unridden until Ulf stumbled into her path during the Red Sowing. Despite spending decades without a rider, Silverwing remains noticeably more docile than Vermithor when approached, which goes a long way toward explaining why Ulf's claiming went so much more smoothly than Hugh's. When it comes to Targaryen history and might, one dragon stands above all, and that dragon is Balerion the Black Dread. Unfortunately, we don't get him in the show as he's already long dead, but his massive skull still looms over the dragon pit as a permanent reminder of just how much bigger dragons used to get. One of the 5 dragons Aenar Targaryen brought to Dragonstone before the doom of Valyria, Balerion is the only dragon in the show's history confirmed to have actually lived through that catastrophe. Aegon the Conqueror claimed him and rode him to victory across Westeros, including the infamous burning of Harrenhal, then the greatest castle in the realm. After Aegon's death, Balerion passed to his son Maegor the Cruel, who used the dragon to brutally crush a short-lived civil war and reportedly killed his own nephew and that nephew's dragon in the first recorded instance of dragon-on-dragon violence in Targaryen history. Even by Targaryen standards, Maegor's reign was remembered as a brutal one, and Balerion's involvement in it only deepened the dragon's reputation as a beast tied as much to fear as to glory. Later riders struggled to control him. One descendant, Aeria Targaryen, was carried off by Balerion for an entire year and returned mortally ill, while the dragon himself came back badly injured. By the time Viserys briefly claimed him near the very end of his life, Balerion was already too old and slow to fly more than once. The biggest dragon in this entire story isn't Vhagar, and it was never Balerion either. According to the books, that title belongs to a massive jet-black wild dragon known as the Cannibal, who has lived on Dragonstone for far longer than anyone can say with certainty. This dragon fed on dead dragons, weaker dragons, and even dragon eggs to fuel his unnatural growth. No one has ever successfully tamed him, and in the source material, anyone foolish enough to try generally doesn't survive the attempt. The show has so far kept the Cannibal almost entirely off-screen, name-dropped rather than shown, even sidestepping an opportunity to feature him directly during the Red Sowing in favor of focusing on Vermithor and Silverwing. Given how much weight the books place on him as a looming, unpredictable threat that could tip the entire war, it would be a genuine surprise if the show doesn't eventually bring him into the open before the Dance of the Dragons burns itself out. 2 more wild dragons round out Dragonstone's population. Sheepstealer, as we mentioned earlier, has already entered the story properly, claimed by Rhaena at the close of Season 2, and flown with mixed results in the Battle of the Gullet. Grey Ghost remains the more elusive of the two, a notoriously shy dragon who reportedly goes years at a time without being seen by anyone at all. Both have been referenced enough that their eventual involvement in the war feels less like a possibility and more like a certainty. By the time the Battle of the Gullet kicks off in Season 3, the dragon math has shifted dramatically from where Season 1 left it. Thanks to the Red Sowing, Rhaenyra's faction has grown from a handful of dragons to roughly 7, a staggering advantage over the Green's 3 confirmed dragons in Vhagar, Tessarion, and whatever remains of Sunfire. That numerical edge was strong enough that by the end of Season 2, Alicent herself quietly approached Rhaenyra to discuss what looked like the beginning of a surrender. But House of the Dragon has never let an advantage like that go unchallenged for long. The Gullet brings fresh chaos, with Rhaena's unstable bond with Sheepstealer already causing collateral damage among her own allies' ships, and Jacaerys facing real danger flying too close to enemy lines on Vermax. With nearly 20 dragons now established across the show, some claimed, some wild, some already dead, and at least 2 more confirmed but unseen, the Dance of the Dragons is only getting started. Given how the history books describe this war, the body count, scaled and otherwise, is going to climb a great deal further before it's through. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you watch the next one on the strongest dragons in House of the Dragon. Go ahead, click it!